On today's episode of Klein's Corner, we sit down with ex MLB player Scott Hatteberg. We talk about his college ball days, playing for Team USA, playing in the MLB, being in the front office for the A's organization, and a whole lot of fun, including the movie Moneyball, where he was portrayed by Chris Pratt as well. Tune in. Let's go. Well, we're back with Clients Corner, your favorite place to get your news, knowledge, and action from TV, books, movies, and your favorite sports teams. Today, we have a very special guest for you guys. Today, not only do they have to get the most handsome man in Hollywood to play him in a movie, but he goes by many names: Scotty H, Hattie, and the guy who hit the home run. He is the man, the myth, the legend, Scott Hatteberg. Scott, how are you doing today? Thanks for coming on.
Hey Jake, how you doing, bud? I'm good, man. How's everything with you?
Doing well. It's not raining in Seattle, so that is a huge win today. I love that. I always like to whenever it's not raining, always got to appreciate the weather. So you grew up in Yakima and you played high school baseball there, and then you went to Wazoo, where you had a pretty good, really good career at Wazoo. And from 1989 to 1991, you were there. 1990, you led the team in hitting, 381 average, along with 88 hits, 105 total bases, 628 slugging percentage, and tied a conference record with 29 doubles. But what people also don't know, which this is why I'm telling them because they would love to learn this, is that you played for Team USA in 1990 for the Goodwill Games. What was it like being on that huge stage? I read that you guys traveled Europe, but most of all, what was it like, getting to represent your country?
It was one of the greater thrills. To be honest, it was something you dream of, but you never really consider it to be a reality. So I was so excited to be selected. We got to travel around. Like you said, it wasn't an Olympic year, but that Goodwill Games year, I am a Northwest guy, ended up being in Seattle. So it was extra cool because I had all the family, and it's kind of in my backyard. So listen, I got those uniforms, I got them up. I mean, there's just nothing like looking down and seeing Team USA on your jersey. It was honestly one of the greater thrills of my life.
Yeah, because you listen to guys, guys who played for Team USA in the NBA, and they're like, obviously playing in the NBA is really cool, but they'll definitely mention like playing for Team USA, getting to represent your country is just a different feeling. Being on such a big stage is definitely a huge honor. And it was cool because you guys got to play at Shaney Stadium in Tacoma
Yeah,
too, where
yeah,
the Rainiers play. Um,
right, correct.
and then fun fact, when I was doing research, you played in the Team Cuba. You guys lost into the title game, I believe. Hit the Lourdes Gurriel Senior was on that team, which is Yuli and Lourdes Gurriel Jr.'s father, and Lourdes is currently playing on the Arizona Diamondbacks in the World Series. So that's pretty cool that you got to play against their
Jake,
father.
let me tell you, dude, that team, that Cuban team was so freaking talented. They had a kid on third base. If you ask Cubans now, there's a bunch of Cubans at the game, but if you mention the name Omar Linares, he was a third baseman. This dude would have made $300 million in our game. He was an absolute freak. I wish people could have seen this guy play. Fast, strong, power, can throw, could run. He was that Mike Trout type of package back then. Anyway, so yeah, that Cuban team, like you said, Uriel. They had so many guys. They were just so talented. So that was a thrill. But it was also really humbling to think that there's guys that play this game that well. So they got a freaking real group of talent.
Yeah, people ask me, it's like, how are these guys from like Central America and South? How are they so good at baseball? And it's like, well, if you see videos, they play with like little bottle caps and broomsticks. So if you like put it together, it's like their hand-eye coordination is insane. Like it's crazy how good they are. So after the Goodwill Games or during your time at Wazoo, actually, you played with Aaron Seeley and John Olerud, and Olerud was also a catcher at the time, and those two guys went on to play in the bigs. Was Olerud? He got drafted a year before you, I believe.
Yes, Olerud did.
Was he kind of a mentor to you while at Wazoo?
he was a freak. I mean, I honestly didn't think that. I mean, I thought if this is what you took to get to the big leagues, I wasn't going to get there. I mean, John Oler, he skipped the minor leagues. I don't know if you knew that. I mean, he was. I mean, they have the John Olerud two-way player award. I mean, he hit like 464 with 20 some homers, and then he was like 15-0 on the hill. I mean, he was the best hitter I'd ever seen until I saw Barry Bonds, and then maybe I'll put Bonds ahead of him. But John Olerud, I mean, he skipped the minors and he went to the big leagues. And I think his second year he won the batting title, and he was hitting 400 pretty much 5 months of the year. So he was, to see this guy play up close. That was a thrill, big thrill.
Do you still talk to him from time to time, or keep in touch with any of your old Wazoo boys?
I try to, yeah, for sure. I just actually talked to him. I was down in spring training with our farm director, who played with him in Seattle and Toronto, and his name's Ed Sprague. Anyway, we were in the tower and we called and caught up with him, and he's doing great, man. Yeah, I'd love to see him get back in the game more. What a talent.
How often do you go back and visit Pullman and go and help out? Do you ever help out with the team at all?
I spoke to the team a few times. I had my oldest two daughters went to Washington State, so I got back, for some football games, and I got involved with the program some. We just had a coaching change, so I gotta go back in there. It's been a little bit of a turnstile for the baseball part of it, with coaches moving, which is too bad. Tough to exist in Pullman, even in perfect conditions. So, having a revolving door at the coaching spot doesn't make it any easier. So yeah, I'll get back there. I'm always a Cougar. I'll be back as much as I can.
Yeah, I work at a Starbucks, and when Pat McAfee's crew when they came to Seattle for game day, they ordered drinks at our Starbucks, and I missed them, and they picked it up, but I missed them by like 10 minutes. But I really wanted to write "Go Cougs" on Pat McAfee's cups. Man. Oh God, I was so sad. I was like, oh, it would have been so good. Would have been perfect.
Yeah, that might have got. Oh, that would have been great.
Yeah, I was like, I think I probably could have gone viral for that or something. Or yeah, it would have been great. And then 2015, you got inducted to the Washington State Hall of Fame. What was that? I mean, obviously a huge honor. What was that like, personally for you?
Listen, I got to go back to when I was in high school. I mean, I was kind of like, skinny little catcher my junior year, had zero real prospects as far as, I was a good baseball player, but I wasn't overly special. Honestly, I thought of going in my senior year, I was just going to go to some school, study and, get on with my life, and things really spiked. So for me to think that to go to Washington State, so you gotta, if you're old like me, back in the day, Washington State was a kind of a powerhouse in baseball. John Olerud, like you mentioned, was there, as well as a bunch of others, and they were perennial top 10, top 15 kind of program. So just to get there, I was thrilled. And then, we've had a, great history of talent, and to make it into that, really any Hall of Fame, but especially that one, it's a pinch myself moment. And I still do this day. So I'm very proud alumni, and extremely proud to be a part of that Hall of Fame.
That's my mom went to Wazoo, so I'm a Coug fan myself.
It's a tight group.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you see someone that went to Wazoo and they're wearing the gear, you just you always say "Go Cougs" to them. It's just like an instinct. You always be like "Go Cougs," and they'll say "Go Cougs" back. So you originally drafted out of high school in the amateur draft in the 12th round for the Phillies, but decided to go to Wazoo. But then 91, you were drafted 43rd overall to the Red Sox. What was being drafted like? What were your first thoughts and feelings?
Well, I was thrilled. I mean, you knew you were kind of getting drafted because you knew you'd talked to so many scouts and stuff. You didn't know who was going to pick you or when, but I was just a baseball nerd growing up, man. I loved the Red Sox back then. I mean, the history of the Red Sox, really all teams, but Boston just stood out. So it was one of the teams that I didn't speak to any scouts or anything. And even funnier was Aaron Seeley, who was my roommate and actually teammate. He was the pick before. I think he was 20 something overall, and I was 43. So we both got drafted by him, which was cool. I mean, we both, somebody you knew heading back. But I was thrilled to be picked that high. I was thrilled to be in such a prestigious, historic, you know, franchise. But you know, they're on the East Coast, so I'm a West Coast boy. I've grown up in the Northwest. Here I am running up and down the Eastern Seaboard. It was awesome. I mean, I tell you, people they love that franchise, and they turn out everywhere. So it was a real thrill being
Yeah, they always travel. I mean, any really Boston, any big city sports, but Boston Red Sox fans always travel pretty
there.
well. What people don't know about, I mean, people don't really realize about the MLB draft is how big it is. I mean, your year, during your draft in 1901, there was 96 rounds, and I mean, it's gone down in rounds way since then. This year's only 20 rounds, but it's much different from the NBA and NFL draft. Like you don't get that starting job right away, unless pretty rare. It's actually a pretty long journey for some people, like Mark Capel, that the pitcher last year. He was drafted first overall by the Astros in 2013, but didn't make his start until 2022 last summer. What was the journey like, going through the minors? Because you played your first game with Boston in '95, but only played 2 games that year and didn't really get a consistent role until '97. Were there ever moments of doubts? Like, were you ever thinking like, man, like these guys are too good, or I'm not good enough, or I can't make it?
Oh man, there was doubts all the time. I mean, it's so competitive. Like you said, there's so many. I mean, 90 some rounds. I mean, there was more minor league teams back then. There was just more competition. And Boston's not one of those teams either that you thought they're just going to give some young buck, here's the keys to the car, go catch them. They want to win every single year. So if you're not going to pull your weight, you're not making the team. So there was pressure for sure. And I spent a year. I kind of jumped to AA my first year, but I spent a full year there. Actually went back the next year, and I made my stops. I worked in AA, and I got to AAA, and like you said, I kind of got a cup of coffee in '95. But the thing I did realize in '96, I got a few more at bats, is that the difference wasn't so much the talent. It just everything was a little more consistent. The pitchers didn't make as many mistakes. The stuff wasn't quite, I wouldn't call it better, but they just didn't make as many mistakes. In AAA, you could pitchers would make some mistakes and you could capitalize. Up there, they just didn't quite do it. So honestly, I ended up feeling like the ability to adapt within an at bat, or just for you to be consistent, and like I said, be able to adapt to the situation was a huge key, rather than changing the game as far as like, oh, these guys are so much better, I got to do something different. The competition was pretty close. You had to control the environment. I mean, it was 35,000 crazy people that were screaming and yelling, living on the edge of you winning and losing that game. So that part was a mental part. And if you could get past that and control that, it was an ability to adapt. I think those are 2 big things. And I currently work with the A's, so I have to talk to these minor league kids a lot. And it's one of the things that I try to express upon them is that you're going to get to a point where they don't get that much better. They just get that much better more often. If that makes sense.
Yeah. How important was having that right support group around you? Were there people, when, I don't know if you talk to your parents or your brothers being like, hey, I don't think they'll make it. Were they there for you being like, hey, you got this, like keep your head up? Like how important is it, mentally, just to keep your mind sharp and, have positive thoughts?
It's huge. The ones that make it usually have that kind of support system, whether it be a coach, wife, brothers, family, or whatever. Coming from Washington State and some really good programs, getting experience Team USA, just those building blocks and that foundation of being in big moments, and and having to deal with it, and the coaching staff to give you some of that advice that'll help you. I think springboards you. I mean, there's some kids that are drafted out of high school that really came from hodunk programs, and they're just, they're extremely talented, but they got nothing to draw upon as far as like how to, handle adversity. There's so much failure in this game. I mean,
Definitely.
Geez, best. It's just so much failure. So there's that mental thing, kind of mental gymnastics you got to deal with. So I was lucky to have some of that thing, which helped. I think it helped me adapt to some of those tough times.
When you got to Boston, what one thing I like to ask is what was the first thing you did with your big league check?
My big league check, my first big league check, it wasn't
Yeah,
that big back then, but
I guess your
I
signing
was
bonus.
well, listen, when I signed in the minor leagues, I think I made about $800 a month. And I had to, that's for 6 months. So there's no money. And then the off season, I was the night watchman at Del Monte. So me and my dog were the night watchman to just make ends meet. Lived in my high school bedroom. So yes, there's no money, and all of a sudden you get thrust into the big leagues. What did I buy? I bought a used Toyota 4Runner and a mountain bike. So those are my splurges. I
You
drove
still
and
have
I put almost 300,000 miles on that Toyota 4Runner.
wow.
I drove from Seattle to Florida for spring training, up to Boston and home 7 times.
Wow, you got to put that on your resume.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So I was
That's
trying to
pretty
get
impressive.
never got.
Being in Boston's and it's a big sports place. What is the atmosphere of Fenway, but also Boston fans like? Because what's a nice way? They're very passionate fans, Boston sports fans.
Yeah, it's so big, it's hard to describe, and then especially if it's a Yankee weekend, it's beyond crazy. I liken it. I haven't been to a real big, think of Manchester U versus Man City or some craziness soccer wise. That's the only thing it looks the fanaticism of it. And Fenway is so cool. I don't know if you've been to Boston, but it's so tucked into the city. You can be a block away from Fenway and not even know you're there, other than the sheer volume. But once you get there, it's this coziest. It's small, but the people feel like they're right on top of you. And when New York is in town, I mean, they know that rivalry is so huge that a guy would be pumping my gas, like a week before the series, and he, wouldn't lead on that he knew me, and he just starts shaking his head, and he go, "How do you got to beat them Yankees? You got to beat them Yankees." I don't even know who this guy is. He didn't ask me for an autograph or anything. They lived it. They lived and died it. It was so amazing. And I think I ended up going from there to Oakland, which was, you almost get whiplash in as far as the intensity. I'd end games in Boston, and I was a catcher. There'd be 60 microphones in my face, just dissecting and asking questions about every single pitch. Headlines would read, if I stunk, Hatteberg debacle, sink socks. That's on 60 papers. But then you go back to Oakland when I ended up going there, and it'd be like, "Oh, valiant effort falls short." They were just so positive that it was so good to start in the boiler. Then it really helped, I think, the rest of my career. But my gosh, you're thrown in the fire as far as intensity.
So in 2001, you were traded to the Rockies because you had that expiring contract, but they didn't re-sign you. There's different. You listen to different players talk about being traded. Luckily, I think that was your only time being traded in the bigs. Did they give you any heads up, or could you just feel the vibes that it was coming?
Yeah, I'd hurt my arm, and as a catcher, I was a catcher. You hurt your arm, it's a big piece missing, right? I just didn't throw the same. And I think they knew it. And, they had, at the time, Jason Varitek had come up. And so the catching spot was pretty solidified. I got traded in the offseason, so it wasn't necessarily I was going to be on the Rockies because I was a free agent. I didn't come to terms with him for whatever reason. And then that's when Billy ended up calling me, and I ended up going to Oakland. But yeah, so getting traded is weird. It's weird, but I was welcoming it. I needed a new space to move, and kind of a starting over type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Going from the Red Sox and your time. It's funny. Actually, when I first looked you up on Google, your second. That's like when it says like people also ask for is why couldn't Scott throw anymore? So it's one of the funny things.
Right here. Yeah, good.
So I'll get into your time with Oakland because that's a big part, and I won't try and ask too many. I'm sure I've watched past interviews, and you probably get asked about the whole Moneyball thing all the time. But I'm curious. Before I toured, you played 4 years with Oakland, and then you had 3 years with the Reds. You actually hit the ball pretty well in Cincinnati. their stadium is notorious for being a hitter's ballpark. Could you tell the difference when you got there? You're like, oh, I can hit the ball better. Is it?
It's a good ballpark to hit it. No, there's no doubt. I mean, I was never been a home run hitter. I think 15 has kind of been that's kind of end up where I end up landing. I was more of an on base percentage guy, but yeah, you could definitely hit some homers there. I think some of it was the National League. I think the National League was a little softer as far as the pitching part of it. So I noticed a little fall off there at that time, but yeah, and the ballpark was better to hit in, I guess. You know, I had a good offensive team around me. I mean, Adam Dunn was on that team. Griffey Jr. was on that team. So we were offensive, pretty strong offensive.
Yeah, 2007, you hit 310. So I thought, I mean, that's right. If you look at that, that's an all-star today. But I guess Pujols was probably had the all-star.
Probably hit a few more home.
Yeah. But just slightly a little better. Yeah, that what you said about Griffey, that goes to my next question. What was it like playing with Griffey Jr.? I mean, you grew up, I mean, you guys probably around the same. You played, he was what, rookie 89, 88 off the top of my head. But you know, he's like he's a legend in Seattle, and you're from, you know, Pacific Northwest areas. What was it like playing with Griffey?
Huge thrill. I mean, the guy's a hero to anybody that kind of grew up in my era. I mean, he was the greatest thing ever. I mean, he was the kid, man. You know, I hard to describe. He was that kind of a once in a generation type of talent. Did everything. He brought a cool factor that, you know, hadn't been really seen before. He actually married. I live in Gig Harbor, Washington. Married a girl from Gig Harbor, Washington. So when we got to Cincinnati, we became really good friends and hung out a lot. And I got to watch him up close. And I know he was kind of on the back end of his career, but this guy still did things that absolutely were jaw dropping. He was just hurt a lot, but what a talent. And I've never been around. I mean, Michael Jordan-esque as far as just everybody. I'd go to movies with him or dinner, and man, you had to plan ahead just to get things roped off just to get him in there, or else he got mobbed. So I haven't been around anything like that. So that was kind of cool. But as far as just a person, he's an awesome dude.
Yeah, he just brings that swagger. Like you just see him, like guys like Acuna or you know, like Julio. They just, like, you see them play and they just like, man, those guys they just got some swagger to them. They're just fun to watch, you know. They got great personalities. So yeah, and it's great for the game and for fans too. You also, Joey Votto was coming up at the time. And what was he like? I mean, he was a rookie, I think, here last year. Maybe is his second year in the league?
He was him and I, were really good friends. I kind of not that I mentored him, but I felt like we got along really well. I knew this guy was hugely talented. I knew it was just a matter of time. So I had a couple years. Actually, my deal was I had a 2-year deal and then a 3rd-year option. So I was like, I had 2 good years, and you'd mentioned I just hit 310, and Joey Votto is coming on at this time. I'm like, dude, this guy is going to be an all-star. He's so good. I could see the confidence in him. My job, the interim, first baseman was over. I'm ready for it. And I told the GM, I said, just let me go. Let me shop that 310. Maybe I can get a nice little job somewhere else. And he goes, oh, I don't know if he's ready. I'm like, trust me, this guy you're fine. This guy's we're going to put his number up somewhere one of these days.
Yeah.
Sure. He became Joey Votto. And, I had spent the season basically now pinch hitting, which kind of, I was 38 or 39, I think, at the time. So kind of ended my reign as a baseball player. But good friend to this day. Keep in touch with him and still root for him. Huge talent.
He's never left the team, too.
I wouldn't let him go.
I think I saw some stat. I do not know if it's the right stat, but it was like he's never like dropped a pop fly at first, or I don't know if he's never made an error, but it was some like you could call him like a LeBron stat, like some like thing that only one player has done.
Sure.
Just some crazy stat. I mean, yeah, he's a great player, good for the game. Because you don't really see. I mean, like besides like Jeter, trying to think guys. Like I I thought Pujols was going to stay on the Cardinals for his whole career, but it's really cool to see guys that just, and it's not even just committed. They just love playing in that city
Yeah.
as well,
And they're
which,
great people, and
mm-hmm.
they embraced by the city, and I mean that's who you want to be the face of the franchise. Just a quality guy.
For sure. Go in. I want to ask you. So there's 162 games in the MLB season. What's it like? As you said, you're a father. How did you manage to, juggle playing in the big leagues, playing all those games, traveling all the time, but also being a dad and a family man as well?
Yeah, no, that's the trick, man. You got to have a good wife, especially if you got kids and all. I mean, that is the key. So we brought, especially when I was in Boston, the kids came out and they went to school in Boston. And kids are amazingly resilient. They're up for the travel. I mean, if you're up for it and you let them do it and they get used to it, they're good at it. And my wife, honestly, she carried so much of the weight. So I'm taking some credit here, but she did the bulk of it. They loved it. They draw upon those memories. But it was hard for me at the time. And as they got older and I ended up in Cincinnati at the end, that was the hardest part made retiring seem really kind of good. So it makes it easier. I mean, they were just too old to come out and go to school. They wanted to be home with their friends. So the visits out in the summer were harder. So the mental part, we didn't have FaceTime either, right?
Yeah.
FaceTime would really help. But a lot of phone calls, and this and that. But it's hard. You're exactly right. And it's a big reason that I'm still involved in the game now, but it's the big reason that I don't get on a coaching staff or get on the field full time again. It's so demanding as far as time.
Yeah, it seems really tough because you're gone. I mean, you only get one day off. I mean, usually it's like Mondays you only get one day off a week, which is insane.
I mean, yeah, you make plans for the 3 days of the All-Star break for the year. I mean, that's your big vacation. So it's hard. 10 months, you got to commit yourself.
A couple other things I want to add. How did you deal with, we talked about, the mental part of baseball. How did you deal with being able to, let's say you're up to bat, a guy throws two on you inside, but you're trying to think, okay, what is he gonna throw to me next? But also just trying to stay calm at the same time, because I feel like I watch players and they're so in their head. How did you find ways to manage to deal with, just thinking about what your pitcher is going to throw to you next, but also staying calm and composed?
Jake, this is the key, man. We could talk you're going to need like 20 freaking Zoom minutes for this one, or 27. I mean, this is too much, but honestly, this is I teach this so much I work a lot in our player development system for Oakland. And this is the key. I mean, this is what we teach hitters. You can't cover everything. You kind of got to know what you do well, and you got to kind of wait for it. And there's a real mental battle, and that whole mental battle it really exists, and it gets harder and harder as you move up the ladder and you get to the big leagues. And there's some at bats where you don't get a pitch to hit, but there's a commitment to a plan, and every pitcher is pretty much different, and there's so much preparation that goes in behind the scenes. When I came up, like I said, I'm a first baseman now. I'm not a big home run hitter, like you said, like Pujols. I really had to just capitalize on mistakes, just not miss, be the best of my skill set. And it really took a lot of video work. I mean, video was really minimal back then. You had to really dig it out and kind of do it on your own. So I really studied pitchers. I really studied tendencies. And then, you really had to study yourself. And I think a combination of those things, if you take them in and don't live and die by each pitch or each at bat, try to give yourself 20 at bats and then, see where you're at. There's that mental battle. And, what worked for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but the whole thing of preparation and mentally committing to a plan, whatever that plan may be, is the key. And it's very, very nuanced. That's broad stroked way of saying it. But it is something, I think, if you take really good hitters across the league and the guys that have success, they will, maybe in not those words, but talk about process and commitment and, pulling that exact mental focus. I think Red Bull was invented for the baseball player, just to pull focus. 162 games a year. I mean, it's every day that you got to get on that knife's edge. And it's just tough to do. So yeah, that's a tough question, but that's the best I can do.
No, because I mean, you make really good points. It's really mental, and you got to create a game plan. Because I see guys like Jared Kelenic for the Mariners. He's talented. He can field. He can hit the ball. But man, that dude he is so in his head sometimes. Like it really showed when he kicked that water cooler and like fractured his toe or fractured his foot. That was just like, come on, yeah. So you definitely notice.
Yes, I've scouted him a bunch. There's no denying the talent. Still a young kid. Said there's a mental growth. You'll see a lot of these guys that, it's not like baseball or basketball or football where you just go in and you plug and play. You get drafted, you go in. This is hard. This takes a while to mature. But if you figure it out, he's got the talent. If he gets his mind right, this guy could be really, really good.
When you were a player, this is a fun question. Were you a seeds guy? Bubble gum? Were you chewing?
I was a seeds guy for sure. I was a gum guy. I couldn't have anything in my mouth when I hit. Because I kind of really blew out. Like I couldn't have anything in my mouth. Which is weird because back in the day it was very much like Red Man, long.
Yeah, chew.
Very popular. Everybody wanted to look like George Brett. So that's kind of gone the way of the dodo. But yeah, seeds. They're a good way to kill time when you're leaning on the rail there between at bats.
Were you a just regular or ranch barbecue?
Hey man, have that. When barbecue came online, I mean now they got dill pickle, Bloody Mary. I mean, spinach artichoke dip. I mean, they got every flavor of the sun. We didn't have that. There was no competing. We had Bazooka bubblegum and straight up David sunflowers. And once the barbecue came out, man, it chews up your mouth pretty good after, a couple of days, but God, it tastes good that first wad.
Yeah, I'm a big sunflower seeds guy growing up playing baseball. But my favorite have you had the Chinook sunflower seeds? Have you tried those?
I don't think I've had Chinook ones.
They're good. They're nice. They got like it was like mesquite barbecue and jalapeno ranch, just these like, and they're good because sunflower seeds sometimes for me they give me the like the sandpaper tongue, like the sodium kind of just hurts your tongue a little bit.
Swell up a little. They tried to push the pumpkin seeds on us for a while, but those things ended up just being the discs that you go ping. Man, some guys could hit for the first baseman from our dugout, so they ended up getting rid of those. Plus, the grounds crew had to pick them all up. But
wow,
yeah, pumpkin seeds.
I just touched on your time in Oakland. You're part of that 2002 team where you guys won the 19 games in a row, right? And what was the 20 games? Wow. What was the culture like there? Like, what was that atmosphere like? Because I always love seeing teams. One of my favorite part about obviously teams is like the culture. Like you can just tell they're having so much fun.
Yeah. Well, this team was very young, and it was these guys were fresh to the league, and talented dudes, but very young. So they had come up through the system, most of them, and I had come over. At the time I was probably 33, around there. So I was 10 years older than some of these guys and had been in the league a lot longer. So it was a youth, to say the least, youth and talented. And they all loved each other, man. These guys would, at the end of games, would go in. Xbox was huge. They'd have these laser projectors, and they'd all barrel into somebody's room, and they'd put 4 projectors on the wall and take all the pictures off. We're at the Ritz-Carlton. They're taking everything off the goddamn walls and playing these monstrous games of Xbox. And I wanted to go down and have a nice dinner and maybe a glass of wine and nobody wanted to join me. But now they were a great unit. They were hungry. They were talented. It was a fraternity, pure fraternity. They loved baseball and they loved hanging out after the game. So the atmosphere was phenomenal and tons of energy.
Yeah, I heard when you hit that home run against the Royals to secure that 20th game that the MLB Hall of Fame asked for the bat, but you pulled the fast one on them and gave them
that
tip of it.
That's kind of well, growing up, back in the day, I had a Louisville Slugger contract, and but back then, I mean, in the 1991, it was it was your life. You signed for life. It was 25 years, but who plays for 25 years?
Oh wow.
Willie Mays, maybe, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you had a set of golf clubs, and you had to use this bat for your whole life. And then as I got older, and for the A, when I started playing for the A's, all these kind of garage bat companies came online, and they were making some beautiful bats. I mean, this one company gave me one that it looked like furniture. It was beautiful, grained and glossy. I took it into BP. You could hardly put a nick on it. The thing was the hardest bat I've ever had. And when I got called to make that pinch hit appearance, that ended up I hitting the homer, and we ended up winning the 20th game. Jason Grimsley was pitching. He was the closer for the Royals. He threw like 97-mile-an-hour bowling ball sinkers. There was no way I was going to hit a home run off this guy. It was a no-win situation. I'm taking this hard bat. First at bat ever that I've taken, and only in the big leagues, that was not a Louisville Slugger. And I hit the biggest run of my life. And we party when we go crazy. It spills over in the locker room. And this old guy comes up to me while I was sitting in the locker, and he taps me on the shoulder, and he goes, "Hey, I'm so-and-so from the Hall of Fame, and we would like that bat." And I went, "Oh my God," it dawned on me I'd used the wrong bat. And I said, "Yes, sir." And I reached in and I handed that man a Louisville Slugger. And I thought nothing would come of it. And I told that story to Michael Lewis, who ended up writing the book, and they sent that bat back to me, believe it or not. We don't take unauthenticated.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, were you for sure, like, in your head, you're like, "Oh, I'm definitely keeping this bat"? Like, was it non-negotiable kind of a thing?
Oh, I was going to use it in BP just because you didn't want to go through your game wood. I mean, you couldn't nick this thing, and it just stayed. The bats I used at the time were ash bats, and nobody uses really ash anymore, but it really had a great flex to it. But they didn't last long; they flaked and whatever. So yeah, this was my BP bat, and I said, "Screw it." Worked out.
So now that once you retired, you came on to the A's as your title as a special assistant to baseball operations.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the transition like from first of all, when you first started, did you have like a newfound respect for the front office? Were you like, "Oh, this is a lot harder than you think"? Was it overwhelming? What were your first initial thoughts?
Well, I was good friends with Billy Beane at the time, still am. I knew that my post-career was going to be with them. It just felt very family across the board, from the training staff to the, clubhouse staff. It was very homey, great group of people all around. And I was really respected Billy. So I kind of came in as a hybrid role. I started off a lot of scouting and a lot of the, on-field stuff as a coach, did some roving coach. But the scouting part and I do a ton of it now, is the puzzle. I mean, and it's really the art too, especially for the Oakland A's, where we can't go buy Mike Trout. He's too expensive and we got no money. We have to draft Mike Trout. So we really live and die by the draft, which becomes an extra pressure situation, but it's another way of thinking that is hard as a player, because as a player, like I said, every at bat I tackled with the preparation to find out this guy's weakness. How can I get this guy today? And then I go in and I do the prep work on watching a high school kid or a college kid, and I kind of got to stop looking at the holes and the ways to beat him, but how I kind of got to squint and see who this guy could be, 5 years from now. So putting that kind of reprogramming the way you look at things has been the hardest part for a player, but it's really rewarding when you hit on them. It's just hard. It's just so hard, but it's fun. It's a great puzzle.
So I was reading one interview that it was back in 2011 when you had I think 2012 when you just started doing scouting, and the guy asked you, "Are you a kind of an analytics guy because the whole sabermetrics with the A's, or are you a person who kind of just scouts just based off of like, oh, okay, this dude looks good hitting this pitch and he's fast and he can hit hard balls"? But you said you were more in the middle as technology and like stats have just gone advanced with like the Statcast and a bunch of that stuff, would you still say you're in the middle? Have you kind of shifted?
No, I'm definitely in the middle. And I don't mean in the middle. I think that my expertise is not, I didn't go to MIT. I think I need to have I do have a working knowledge of the stats and how they translate to the game and how they translate to my eye. But honestly, I've spent a life watching the game, playing the game, understanding the nuance. And I think that's my expertise. So I think that I'm hired for that opinion. But being able to, correlate that with the analytics side of it, to the degree, I know you can kind of, I think it paints the picture a little finer. We have a lot of guys that are really smart with great degrees that are in charge of, doing a lot of analytic digging, and, they stick on that side. So I kind of stay in my lane a little bit, and I think that this is the reason that, guys like me are hired, I think, to bring that kind of boots on the ground perspective. And then we marry the two, and we all get in a room, we all hash it out. And I think where we have fine common ground is where we've usually hit on the best, or been most consistent hitting on guys. So yeah, I still am firmly in the middle, and it's a constant learning part for me, just because there's always analytics that are changing, and what's becoming more important, what's becoming less important, and how does it look on the field.
Yeah, what you just said right there, like what's more important, what's less important, brings me to the next question. Is there a stat or just a skill about a player that's overlooked, do you think, or that needs to like more attention about them?
Well, there's the one that is so elusive, and it's really kind of who the kid is, the character part.
Mm.
Like, we've talked a bunch of times. We've talked several times about just the fight, the ability to compete and learn and be consistent and handle the failures. And that mental part is really hard to die. It's really hard to see, because most of these kids we're drafting, they're the best kid on the field. It's like looking at a field of deer and there's the one guy with freaking horns on, and they stick out. But the one thing that you can't really delve into is the mental part, because once they get thrown into a room of a bunch of guys with horns, it's how do they react, and are they able to handle the, being away and handling the adversity, and then the big lights, it's hard to get. So, the combine has helped. We've added the combine. So we go and we interview a lot of them, or as many as we can. And you can kind of peek in there and see their knowledge. But until they get in the fire, that's the one part that's elusive.
Do you think players that come out of high school, or is there a maturity difference from the players that, go through college first or just come out of high school? Or is it just based off of their personality and who they are?
Well, there's a maturity difference. I mean, the college guys are usually just a little more polished. They've had 3 years or at least 3 years of, usually a good program. And, they've been taught some things as far as structure and just how to practice, really. Not to say that they end up more mature than a high school kid does. I mean, I think we're kind of leaning towards being a little more lenient, or a little more apt to take a high school kid. And I think you put them in our system, I think we do a good job of developing them. As opposed, the college game is very competitive for the coaches. They're making a lot of money, so they're not necessarily wanting to develop them. They want to win. So sometimes colleges can, put some bad habits on certain guys that we end up having to break, where that may not be the case with a high school kid. But as far as the maturity, yeah, they're just on different levels of just life experience, but doesn't necessarily mean that's where they end up.
When you talk to these kids, like these kids in the minor league system, how often do you talk to them about social media and like handling criticism and seeing what other people think of them? Because I'm just curious to the way that you handle it when you're a player. Because I found this one article, this one old column, that it was written by Rob Nayer from ESPN. He called your extension in 2003 with the A's a quote sinkhole and quote a head scratcher, and compares your contract to Terrence Long's contract, which I don't have much context about Terrence Long, but I just think.
What was it? So he thought that was a bad sign.
Yeah, he was just like, oh, it was right after he talked about that signing, and then when you guys, it was not Dan Herring, Jose Guillen. It was right when you guys got or traded Jose Guillen, or got traded for him. But yeah, he was just like, oh, they talk about him being the Moneyball guy and efficient, but like they could do better with some other player. So yeah, what do you teach them in terms of like social media? Because you'll see some
Yeah,
players, they get criticized, like Kevin Durant, but he'll like talk back to the players, and he's
yeah.
kind of they get mean for that, and that could just go down a sinkhole. So I'm just curious what you think about
Well,
these.
yeah. I mean, it's the social media aspect. I didn't have to deal with. I mean, obviously, we
Mm-hmm.
deal with it to a point now. It's not going anywhere. We kind of stay out of it unless there becomes an issue. I think everybody's their own brand a little bit. That's kind of the way they look at it, and we kind of end up having to embrace it. I mean, unless there's something problematic, I think that we get involved. Otherwise, it's not really. I think that there's a lot of noise out there as far as from an instruction point of view. They're believing certain things that are online, maybe that we don't agree with or we don't teach. So that the gurus or whoever online, I think they know how to, launch angles, a horrible thing. And some of these things that get taught are being taught by people that do not know, and they're saying things wrong. Though we may be trying to get them to the right place, or a place that maybe we can that result exists. They're just, I don't know. They're not teaching it the right way. So some of that noise that we don't like, and we have to. That's a constant battle. As far as like the people talking smack about making you, because I'm sure now. I mean, it's much louder. Right? It was a few articles. I mean, you build thick skin. I mean, people are going to love you and people are going to hate you, and you kind of got to do your thing. And that's part of the going back to the mental part. Yeah, it's hard. You don't want anybody saying you stink or you're not wanted, but thankfully, like I said, I played in Boston and I was hated half the time and loved half the time. Maybe not even in that proportion. It might have been more hated than loved, but you kind of just got to battle through it. And we try to arm these guys with as much positivity as you can. And I think a lot of them try not to read it, but I know for them that's a battle. And just the pressure on some of these kids, like back in the day, I didn't know scouts were watching me as a high schooler or a college kids. Now
Oh
it's,
wow.
oh gosh, these kids, there's 150 guns that go up in some games. So the pressure right there, and just the hype where you're going to get drafted, and handling that for those kids, even the college kids, I think would have been really tough for me. But I think they've come in it a little bit. That's really tough. So from a young age, these kids are forced to kind of grow some of that thick skin, I think, or else they end up folding early before they
Yeah.
get drafted.
Uh,
It's a tough one. Yeah.
It is. I just, how much would you say this is? Do you ever have any like recency? I guess the word, I'm not sure if recency bias is the best term to use, but let's say like you're scouting a player and you think he's really good on one thing, but then you whiff on him, and then you see a next player that has similar value. Do you ever think in your head like, oh, he's not he's not gonna, how do I say this? Do you ever have like a fixed mindset when you're scouting guys, pretty much? Like,
I really try not to. And you can go. That's a great point, actually. Really good question. You can see a guy that you really liked, and you like his tool package, and you draft him, and he just goes out and does not make it. And then you see another guy 3 years from then, and he looks exactly like that guy, and you're already going, he reminds me too much of that guy. I'm staying away, hands off. And then he ends up popping. There is some difference, and a lot of times it's that mental kind of fortitude difference. I don't know what it is, but it's one of those things you kind of got to scout them. If you like the tools before, you kind of got to see. There's a lot of retro studying. When you draft these guys, I always am referring back to who I hit on. How did this guy do it? What did he end up doing? Did he grow? Did his fastball change? Did his his swing change? Did his game change in any aspect? And then just kind of see how or why it did. Did he run into a guy that things clicked? A great coach. I mean, that happens. So it's a kind of a case by case thing, but it's a trap that you try not to fall into. Knowing this guy reminds me so much of that guy, and he was such a dud. To try not to fall into that trap and pigeonhole him right away. But yes, that happens a ton. It's a really good question.
We talked about a little bit how I just want to go back to a question I meant to ask earlier. Talked about how you were a catcher and then moved to first base. We kind of seen that with other players. I mean, I feel like that's a common, like a theme now. Like Joe Mauer was catcher for the longest time. He moved to first base, and Buster Posey, catcher, and then got moved to first base. Do you think it's idea of like you guys being really good at like picking the ball, or do you think it's just like why do you think it's a common theme now?
Well, I think that, what it is the catching position is very taxing, and a lot of those like Posey and Mauer kind of did it later in their career. But the one common denominator is they could hit. I mean, hitting is the bottom line. And and as far as the catching, the one thing we do is catch the ball. So learning to pick up the ground ball part, the defensive part, you might never be a Gold Glover, but the basics of catching and that part are in place. The one thing I think that it gets moved over there is it's less taxing. You're trying to maximize what these guys can do with the bat. I mean, these are all stars. You're talking Joe Mauer, Buster Posey. You want them in the lineup more often and fresher in the lineup. The catching part is exhausting. So you don't play as many games and some of those third and fourth at bats, in Kansas City and friggin' July, you're not all there. So I think some of that is just to maximize the bat.
I want to go ask something that you kind of talked about earlier, being a small market team. How it's people don't realize like it's super difficult to win in a small market. It's because no guys are going to want to go and play in LA and New York, and especially those teams have a lot more money as well. So how often do you guys find yourself kind of missing out on not being able to sign this player because they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to come to Oakland? And how do you guys deal with those difficulties?
Well, it goes both ways too. I mean, I really got to applaud Billy Beane and the rest of our front office. They've survived, and not only survived, thrived, on just shoestring budgets. I mean, if you go look at the All-Star game, Matt Chapman, Max Muncy, Matt Olson, both catchers, Jonah Heim, Sean Murphy, these are all our guys. We couldn't keep them. You couldn't afford them. So, I mean, that's an all-star team. Like, we field that team. Chris Bassett was on that team. I mean, it's just like you look around, Marcus Semien, we couldn't re-sign him. So we become kind of a feeder team for the rest of the league, which is hard. So then the pressure becomes, well, we got to redevelop, we got to redraft, and they've done it so many times. So that part's hard, not being able to re-sign them, but then trying to get the free agent. Like you said, who wants to come to the team that's not that's struggling? Say we want a $15 million pitcher. You're not necessarily going to get a $15 million pitcher because that $15 million pitcher is going to want $20 million to come to Oakland. So if you got $15 million, you end up getting a $10 million caliber guy, but you got to overpay him to get him here for 15 or something. So there's a little of that you have to battle as well. So if it wasn't already tough, that makes it tougher. But that's the unfortunate just aspect of the environment that the A's live in right now.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, people don't like the Astros, but hats off to them because they drafted a lot of those guys. I mean, they're a dynasty. You gotta call them a dynasty. What it was like 6 ALCSs in the past 7 years. I might be wrong about that, but it's like, yeah, Altuve. I mean, Correa's gone, but he was part of that team for a while. Bregman. I mean, Kyle Tucker. Like, man, they
gotta look back though. And you gotta look back, and you gotta remember they tanked it for several years to get those picks. So the one thing that they could do was they tanked it, and they got all those first round picks, and I applaud them on picking the right guys. Mm-hmm. But once they got the right guys, they were a big enough market that they could continue. They could get them beyond arbitration and afford them when they became stars, as opposed to us, well, we kind of got to do them, but we just can't afford them once they become stars. So that's the drama for being an A, living in the green and gold. But yes, they're definitely a dynasty, and they're a phenomenal, talented group.
And talking about the A's, I don't know if you can speak on this because you work for an organization, but I kind of want to touch on what are your thoughts on the whole, like, them relocating and everything? What's the chatter? Is it kind of just when you're in the front office, is it kind of just known there? You guys, it's just not something you guys talk about? Like, how, what's the vibe?
I wish I could give you, I wish there's been so many different scenarios. There's so many different locations. And this has been going on for, I can't even tell you how long. I mean, it's become white noise for me. Yeah. I know it says we're going to Vegas. I'm not so sure we're going to Vegas. Maybe we are going to Vegas. Honestly, I really I really don't know the saga. It's just been so many different options. But yeah, I mean, a perfect world, it would have been, of course, the Oakland A fans. I've done so much there. I have such big memories of the East Bay. I love it there. I lived there for a long time. Still have so many friends. It's an incredibly great fan base. Perfect world. That would be where it is. I'm not the money guy. It's not my team. So I'm gonna just stay in my lane on this one. I hope we end up. I don't know. I just hope it ends up where we're not in limbo like we are. Sooner rather than later.
I listened to it was I think it was A's some Bay news air some Oakland news channel, and they had Rich Wolkoff on. He was a broadcaster from the Bay Area, and he says that I don't know. He says John Fisher's kind of he kind of ran the team to the ground because he won in the new stadium. Do you have any, just as kind of journalism, or just a good question to ask? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to not dial too much into the whole
Yeah.
Fisher thing. I mean, like I said, I work for the team. I'm a company guy. I want this team to succeed, and I would love it for it to be in Oakland. I don't own the team. It's a business decision here that is well above my pay grade. But listen. I wish we could spend more money. Listen. I wish we could be a little more competitive. But this is not my thing. I'm a lowly scout / coach, so I'm gonna stay in that lane.
Going back to the A's and the whole Moneyball thing, what was it like getting to work with Chris Pratt? I just curious about that question.
Chris Pratt was an awesome dude, really cool dude. I always thought Hollywood guys were real short guys that needed to stand on phone books and stuff, but dude, this guy was a big dude. I mean, he was taller than me. He ended up, he just broke the mold in who I thought Hollywood people were, and it was so cool because Parks and Rec was a big show for us when we growing up, and for him to come play me was amazing. You got to meet Brad Pitt and everything. It was a great production. Everybody's really cool. So yeah, getting this kind of a peek behind that Hollywood curtain was really interesting. Definitely.
It's cool too because he's a Pacific Northwest guy as well.
Yep.
He's from the
Camas, I believe, or Vancouver down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So during your whole baseball career, you definitely forged some good friendships, as you mentioned. With Billy Bean, you guys are close. But I heard you're good buddies with Adam Dunn. Is that true?
Yeah, good buddies.
Yeah. So I was doing some research and I found this. I just want you to fact check this, that he once made a prank phone call to the Reds radio announcer Marty Brennaman, who was filling in doing some like radio time. And he said, and Dunn identified himself as Adam from Milwaukee, spoke in a goofy voice, and asked if you were a good first baseman and if the radio guy was wearing a shirt. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. I don't remember about. He asked about wearing a shirt. I remember him calling in. I think he did it more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was all about that stuff for sure. Adam Dunn was awesome, funny dude.
Yeah, it seems like he was really a fan favorite in Cincinnati. He was a good ball player too. It was fun to watch.
Phenomenal. Believe it or not, that guy was like one of the most hyped Texas quarterbacks coming out of high school.
Oh, and where do you play?
I think he was going to go to UT. It was, he came out of high school, but this dude was a real quarterback. It's kind of funny too because I kept teasing him. I go, "How do you throw a football so good and you throw grenades with a baseball?" I mean, it's terrible arm strength, but he could hit a ball 6 miles. This guy was a freak at the plate.
Where in Texas is he from?
He lives in Houston now. I don't know if he grew up there. I think he did, but I mean, in that Texas world, he was the man.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, he's built like, I can see his build is fit for a quarterback, and also just Texas football is just a religion in Texas too. So it's crazy big. Doing some more research, I read that you're a big music guy. What kind of music do you listen to? I want to learn more about you and not just about your MLB career.
I love music. I mean, I'm not stuck in one genre. I mean, I've kind of gone down the vinyl rabbit hole a little bit
Mm-hmm.
lately. We got, I mean, I started in the vinyl, so I bought a lot of records as a kid. Kind of went through I went through 8 tracks, cassette tapes, CDs, and now now we are where we are. But listen, I love country music. I love Tom Waits. I'll listen to some jazz music. I'm all over the board. I like it all. I'm always looking for something new. But yeah, I'm just an appreciator.
Well, have you listened to the new Rolling Stones album?
I have not. Really
It's
good.
actually, yeah, it's not bad. The guys, for how old they are, I applaud them. I do. They still sound pretty good. One question actually I meant to ask earlier as well was, it was your strikeout percentage was insanely low compared to like the guys nowadays. Do you want to guess how many strikeouts there were this season total in the MLB?
It'll make my head explode or hurt more than it already does. I mean, it's I don't know how many. Give it to me.
It was 41,826 strikeouts. And
Do you walk total? What's the percentage?
I don't have the walk percentage on top of my head, but from your last season in 2008, there were 32,877 strikeouts. Why do you think that? I'll tell you one, the number of walks have stayed relatively the same in the 15,000s. But why do you think the strikeout numbers have gone up? Are guys just swinging and missing more? I mean, it seems you think like maybe pitching's gone better, but the walk rate stays the same. Do you think they're just trying to hit home runs and swing for the fences every time?
It's 100% the case that we have valued as a organization, as a collective group. Major League Baseball has deemed the home run and the walk to be the way to the win. I mean, that has become it. So everybody is definitely trying to homer. There's less two-strike approach. There's less let's put it in play. That mindset is kind of gone. It's definitely now hit the homer, and then it is combined with the pitchers are throwing harder, and stuff has gotten better, and so it's a combination of the two.
One thing I need to ask you, I made sure that what are your how I always tell like non-baseball fans that are other sports fans, like people don't appreciate how good Shohei Ohtani is at baseball. I mean, if he didn't get injured, he could have gone like, I mean, as good as he was as a pitcher, he's worth 35 million. As good as he is as a hitter, he's worth 35 million. So getting him for like 60 million is a bargain. What do you see when you look at him?
Yeah, he is the best the game may have ever seen. I mean, he's kind of like, maybe not to the degree, but I mean, he's the equivalent of you pick the number one quarterback in the league, and then you pick the great linebacker in the league. And this guy does both. I mean, it just doesn't happen in the game, really. I mean, he is my favorite thing. Listen, I've been on the field. I've watched him hit. The BP is jaw dropping. They say he may be the fastest in the league, which I didn't really realize.
Yeah, he's 6'4" and like 230, and his
shoulders are freaking so wide. He is just built like he's huge. He runs like the wind. Hearing opposing hitters, our guys, talk about his stuff pitching, I mean, they just can't stop talking. Their minds blown. So I hear really good hitters talk about this guy's stuff being so ungodly. And then what I see offensively and what he can do, and he hits in the same group as Mike Trout, who on his own is a comet. I mean, this guy, I didn't think you could ever get better than this guy. I thought he was Griffey reincarnate, and he is.
Yeah, yeah.
And he pitches like Cy Young. I mean, so I don't know. Baseball isn't it doesn't get as much love as, let me say, basketball or football, but in the equivalency of, like LeBron and pick whatever, great football player out there right now. This guy, he's doing things that the game has never seen. It's historical. Yeah. So I think I can't say enough great things about it. If they gave this guy, I mean, he's worth $100 million a year. You could honestly make the argument he's worth $50 million and $50 million. Somebody could say. I mean, as a pitcher,
I don't think. I mean, I'm 23 years old, but in terms of like how I tell people, it's like in terms of how dominant he is at the sport, I don't think we've seen that in guys like LeBron or like Tiger, like that or and like Connor McDavid, like those guys are so dominant and
Yeah.
set themselves so far apart from other players. Like that's how good he is. I
And it's
mean,
just baseball.
we as a baseball, we thought Mike Trout was gonna be like we thought Mike Trout was like
Yep.
the bar.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought no one was gonna be the next Mike Trout.
See, but
But
the thing about, yeah, you're right. I did too. I thought, oh, I preached this guy as soon as he came up. I go, this guy's going to be the greatest baseball player maybe that ever lived. And the thing about baseball, and I guess you could equates to football, is that there's two dynamics to it. I mean, there's two sides to it. Basketball, there's one side really. I mean, you do play defense, but it's kind of like one thing. Hockey, similar. I mean, yeah, you play defense, but like football, there's just, you got to get off the field in that part of the game. Mm-hmm. For us, we don't pitch. Nobody pitches. You're a hitter. This guy is like Pat Mahomes, and freaking Bosa coming at you on the defensive side every night. I mean, he's both. What would that look like in football? And where would we put him? What pedestal would we put that guy on? And he's doing it in baseball.
Yeah, he would at one point he was like number one. Him and Olsen, they were going at it for home run. Ohtani was like leading the league in home runs, and then he was like fourth in stolen bases. The craziest thing to me was when I think it was earlier this year, he hit 2 home runs in a game, I think, and had like 10 plus strikeouts or 10 strikeouts. I was like,
yeah, I remember that.
I was like, it's shocking, and and I really hope that more people will fall in love with him. But that's the thing. It's like if he goes to New York, if he goes to like the Mets, oh my God, he'd be a god in New York. The Mets would have a statue of him already. But it's the Angels small market but I think it seems like he doesn't like to be in like the huge spotlight. He kind of wants to stay in a small market. So I'm just curious to see where he ends up signing.
I agree. I think part of the reason he's kind of flown under the radar is just because he is kind of a subdued guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be unable to avoid it if he ends up in New York. But
yeah,
just think about what team wants to put his number permanently on their wall. I mean, the greatest baseball player ever. I mean, I'd want him on my wall.
Yeah, he is phenomenal. I saw him pitch earlier this year at the Mariners game, so I was like, I got to see this. It's non-negotiable because he's so good.
Right.
Along with you loving baseball, you love to fish as well. Where are some of your favorite places to fish? Or before I ask that question, what makes Chinook salmon such a unique part of Washington and fishing in Washington?
Now we're talking questions. Finally, we get to something important. Well, the Pacific's Northwest is just home to 5 species of salmon. Mm-hmm. So the Chinook is the king salmon. They're both called Chinook king. They get the biggest. Maybe not the most flavorful. I think the sockeye salmon, or the reds that would be called, are the most flavorful salmon. But there's the silvers, there's dogs, there's pinks, there's the Chinook, and then there's the sockeye. So there's 5 species. Anyway, they just kind of come up here in the Northwest and other parts of California, and it's our cool. Not many places in the world get them, and we get them. So it's a cool thing. And the great thing about salmon is they come up. Basically, they live in the ocean. They come back to where they were born, and they lay eggs and die. So it's it's very, very biblical, I think, in their life and their whole life cycle. But as far as fishing, I actually just got off the river days ago. I think I told you I was fishing with Katze, our manager, and Billy Bean. We did a little 3-day trip down the Deschutes, chasing some trout and steelhead. Caught a couple nice steelhead on the swing, so that was really exciting. And I'm a river guy. I like throwing flies and 2-handed rods called spey rods. So I chase it all over here, summer and winter, here in the Northwest.
If you ever had, 2 questions. One, have you ever had, are there moments when you're fishing, you're like, wow, this is, one, just as good as hitting a home run? And 2, have you ever had a moment in your fishing life where you're like, this is as good as hitting that walk-off home run in 2002?
Whew, that walk-off was pretty good. Listen, you hook into a steelhead, you've hit an ocean animal in 2-3 feet of water, and watching this freight train take off, it sends a jolt through your body for about a half an hour trying to land this son of a bitch. That you will. It's hard to think of a greater feeling. But man, we had 58,000 people in that stadium, and to hit a home run, a team home run, right? That puts your whole team on the map, and everybody kind of wins in that home run. A lot of times you hit a home run, it's your home run. But this is, this solidified a record for the whole crew. Man, nothing like celebrating with all your buddies and all your brothers. So, as much as I love fishing, man, nothing came close to that Moneyball homer.
I just want to ask a couple more of the Moneyball questions. There was when I was doing the research, it says that Art Howe is pretty. He's not very happy on how the movie portrayed him, and when I was doing more research, it looked like you just didn't. You played because in the movie it's like, oh, you're not starting Hatteberg, yeah. And it was like, but then I did more research, and you played that season. You just weren't hitting in like the right spot or something.
Well, yes. First off, if you were to what people ask your thoughts of the movie. Did you like the movie? Yeah, I liked the movie. I mean, I didn't know how you were going to take a stats movie about a team that only got 15,000 fans and make it interesting, but they did, and they did put Hollywood hot sauce on a lot of things. We didn't pay for Cokes, and there's some liberties, but the biggest knock was Art. We loved Art. Art was a great guy. Is a great guy, and they have to. Hollywood's got to have a villain, so yeah. They made him the villain and made him and Billy. Billy is a competitive, fiery dude. Yes, they had it out, I'm sure. We didn't really see it, but in arguments and this and that. That's who Billy is. And despite it all, Art handled it great. We didn't notice anything, and I think that was his job. Art's a great guy, and he got thrown under the bus way too much in my view.
Yeah, did he make sure when he's like, make sure Brad Pitt's working out in the movie, make sure that he does all that thing. Did he get some insight about how he was portrayed, I assume?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was always eating, if you noticed. Like Billy's got a couple things. Billy works out fiendishly. Yeah. So he's always working out, and it's a good distraction for him, especially during games. That's totally true. He was always eating and spilling all over himself. And he's notorious for just being a horribly sloppy eater and constantly eating. So they nailed both those little mannerisms. But yeah, no, I mean, Brad Pitt. You got Brad Pitt playing.
Yeah, that's so cool. Are you a big movie guy? Do you like? Are you big?
Love movies.
Where do you put that on Brad Pitt's? You don't have to rank them, but like, do you put him in the top 5? I personally think I really liked him in Troy. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I think I liked him better in Moneyball.
I know he was definitely better in Moneyball, but I really like him. The Moneyball was definitely a top performance for sure.
Troy made me feel like I needed to do more abs.
Yeah.
He kind of killed me, and I was like, oh, geez.
That's definitely, it's a nostalgia movie for me, so I think where do you put Moneyball? Maybe it's just you have some bias, but do you put that as your favorite baseball movie?
Ooh, good question. I think it's a really well done one. I'm probably partial to Bull Durham. I think that was a hard one for me to get past, but I think as far as the serious ones, it's up there for sure. I mean, I think it's got to be one of the top ones. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think they did it really good. I like baseball movies. I like sports movies. But as far as the baseball ones go, it's got to be up in the top few.
For me, I don't know if it's hands down, but it's Sandlot.
Oh, yeah, Sandlot. You see, that's kind of before me. That was your sweet spot.
Yeah, that's a movie. That's like that's my number one movie. That's like I have to make sure people around me have seen that movie because it's such a good story too. Yeah, I definitely think. But Moneyball, that's one of my buddy's favorite movie because he does like analytics for the Lakers and he just loves all those sabermetric stats and stuff.
Sure.
The guy that Jonah Hill played, it was a mix. It was combined of two different guys, right?
Well, the way I think it is one guy, and his name was Paul DePodesta. and I don't know who the other guy would have been, but I know it was Billy and
Hmm.
Paul, who um, incredibly smart guy. I think didn't love the way he was portrayed in the book.
Yeah.
Maybe he kind of got irked and kind of just walked away from the whole project, and they ended up going the other way. But this guy was a two-sport athlete from Harvard. I know he was played as this kind of nerdy, overweight kid, but this guy was far from nerdy and far from overweight. I mean, he was a two-sport stud out of Harvard that was like lean and mean. And I don't know, maybe he disliked the portrayal.
Yeah. What's funny about that team is that, I mean, the movie's great and it shows about like, but you guys had, I mean, you had the AL MVP and the Cy Young winner too, which is funny because I feel like it's definitely not talked about in the movie because you had Miguel Tejada and Zito, right? Zito was early Bear Zito.
Yeah.
Was
They definitely glossed over some major pieces. So Giambi left. They lost Giambi. They lost Johnny Damon, right? And they lost their closer Isringhausen, and they replaced them with myself and Chad Bradford or whoever, and can't remember the other piece. But the point is, they forgot to talk about Tejada, like you said, and the big three: Zito, Hudson, Mulder, they're phenomenal talents already. Just got 1 year better. Eric Chavez on the corner, Ramon Hernandez. I mean, as a catcher, Tejada, Mark Ellis at second base or whatever. I mean, talk about these guys are all Gold Glovers, and then you got my schmuck ass over on the first base side. I mean, that was talk about pressure. I mean, it was like being in the Beatles, and just picking up the freaking guitar. It was terrible. They were a phenomenal group of players and didn't get their due in the movie for sure.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk. You always got to give the other guys credit for sure. Well, that's all the questions I have. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking and learning more about you. And one question: have you ever been to a Bass Pro Shop? I've always wanted to.
Have I?
Yeah.
Been to several. Oh yeah, Cabela's.
I've always wanted to go Cabela's. I always see the hats, and I'm just like, I gotta go. I gotta go. Just
aquariums. They usually got a polar bear that's like 15 feet high, and it's just something to walk around and take a look at everything. But they sometimes have bowling alleys and kettle corn. Shoot, it's a good afternoon.
I want you to. I also want to thank you for putting me on to Zach Geloff because he's a stud. He's also Jewish like myself, so it's always fun to see.
Yeah, Team Israel. He was team for
he was. Yeah, I saw. When I first looked him up. One of the YouTube goes, "Is he the next Sean Green?" And I was like, "Whoa, okay, now we got ourselves going." I love it.
His got drafted this year, and he had a good first start. Started off pretty good, so could have two of them in the league before long.
Yeah, I put my buddies onto him, and he broke the record. He's the fastest 10 games what was it? I have it in front of me. It was the fastest A's player to get to double-digit home runs, right?
Yep, I believe that's true. We were talking earlier about just mentally tough dudes. This is one of those guys. So
yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again soon. Maybe have you on another time.
Would love it. Enjoy the talk.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Hey, buddy.
Wow, that was awesome. Had a really fun time talking with Scott. Really good dude. Love learning more about him. Pre-career in college, playing with Team USA. Coming up in the big leagues in the minors, playing with the Red Sox. Playing with the A's, being on that Moneyball team, and his post-career. Working in the A's front office. Even learned some stuff about fishing, which was awesome. This has been Jake with Glenn's Corner. Thanks for watching.